So hey guys, now in most of my movie reviews, I tend to start out with something like, recently I saw this movie. But if I said I saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse recently, that'd be a lie, because I saw it a couple weeks ago on Christmas. Which, Christmas itself was like a week after the movie originally came out, so this video is kinda late. However, continuing on my trail of honesty with you guys, I wasn't planning to see this movie to begin with. You see, when it came time for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse to come out, none of the theaters in my area were showing it. Like, I'd have to get one of my parents to drive me out of town, probably an hour or more, just to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And I am a huge Spider-Man fan, but I'm not that huge. I'm not driving an hour just to see a movie. However, I got to experience a Christmas miracle this year. Not only were my grandparents outside of the void of Spider-Man-ness, I don't know if that's a word, they volunteered to take me. They asked me if I wanted to see a movie, and it just worked perfectly. And I'm so glad to tell you guys that it was, don't say awesome, you say awesome in every video, just try to come up with something else. I'm so glad to tell you that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was amazing. Wait a minute. Anyways, before we start, if you guys don't know how I usually do movie reviews, typically what I do is I first talk about the non-spoilery stuff so that you people who haven't seen it can get kind of like a feel of how I felt about it. And then when I run out of non-spoilery stuff to say, I go to the spoilers with an obvious spoiler warning in between, because it'd be kind of weird to abruptly transfer into spoilers without telling anybody. Now, I really enjoyed Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's not my favorite movie, but I can see why people would definitely like it and consider it to be their favorite movie. Personally, I would think of it as one of my favorite Spider-Man movies, and that's saying something because there's a lot of Spider-Man movies out there. And okay, let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. Every single YouTuber on YouTube who has reviewed this movie says something like, "Oh wow, the art style is so cool, it looks like a comic book. Oh wow, this soundtrack is amazing." And don't get me wrong, I kind of agree with these reviewers, but starting with the art style and the comic bookiness, it did wow me when the first trailer came out, but after that, I kind of stopped being in awe of it, and even though you do notice a lot of it in the movie, it doesn't capture your attention as much, which is actually pretty good, because if your art in a movie is distracting from the main story, I could see that as kind of a problem. There's kind of a balance in there. Also, in terms of the soundtrack, I really only noticed that one Post Malone song they used.
Needless to say, oh, for crying out loud.
And other than that, I didn't really notice its soundtrack, which I guess the balance thing again. Also, speaking of the artwork and its trailer, the comic bookiness of the first trailer wasn't the only thing that got me excited for this movie. I was excited that it was animated in general. Like, the idea of an animated Spider-Man movie is a really cool one, and plus starring Miles Morales no less, and you got yourself a great idea. Plus, it also had my favorite comic book villain, the Prowler, in it, and I liked the Prowler before he was cool. But I remember after seeing this trailer, it filled people with a lot of mixed emotions, and I had a lot of these mixed emotions going into this movie. You see, on the one hand, it had an awesome art style, it had an awesome idea, it was about Spider-Man, which sells like hotcakes, and plus, it had the writers or directors, I don't remember, the writers or directors of the Lego Movie. On the other hand, it was about both the Spider-Verse and Miles' origin story, which I could see them having a lot of trouble balancing it out. But more importantly, it was being made by Sony Animations, which just before this movie gave us this pile of poop. Almost literally. However, after I saw this movie, the cons were blown out of the water because it was really good, and I kind of want to say it was in part of the writers, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, the same guys who wrote the Lego Movie, as I said before. They managed to make a perfect balance of introducing the Spider-Verse to some people, introducing Miles Morales' origin story to some people, and really fitting in a whole ton of Spider-Man Easter eggs and references.
How many more Spider people are there?
Save it for Comic-Con.
What's Comic-Con?
There were a lot of things in this movie that normal people who really didn't know that much about Spider-Man probably wouldn't have put in, or made jokes about, or made references to, that these people did. And I don't know if they were Spider-Man fans or that they really did the research, but they made this really, really good. The end credit scene alone shows how much love they put into this movie. And if you don't wait for after credit scenes, shame on you. Except for my grandparents, because they didn't wait for the after credit scene. What was really funny was, though, on the ride home, they went on and on about how many people worked on this movie. Like, they were genuinely surprised the end credits were so long. Anyway, speaking of a whole ton of people, another con people are kind of worrying about is that there are too many spider people in this movie. And I don't want to give all the praise specifically to the writers, but they did really, really well, because they solved this one too. And sure, there were some more favorite spider people than some others, but they gave us a lot of time to at least appreciate all of them. And I talk a whole bunch more about how good this movie was and how good the writers were. I guess I can't give all the credit to them, because there were a whole ton of other people working on this movie. But that's really all I have to say that's not spoilery. Now, I highly, highly recommend this movie if you are a huge Spider-Man fan. And even if you're thinking about seeing it, I'd at least recommend you getting it out on DVD. However, if you are a new Spider-Man fan, I'd recommend you seeing, or at least looking up something to do with the Spider-Verse. Maybe not like reading the comics themselves, but maybe like watching a couple episodes of Ultimate Spider-Man. I know they did some of that, and YouTube is uploading their full episodes now, which is really cool. My dad, who's not of a big of a Spider-Man fan as I am, said that watching those episodes of Ultimate Spider-Man that did have the Spider-Verse did help him a lot. Anyways, enough talking. I can't hold these spoilers in any longer. On to the spoiler section. I can't believe that Spider-Man dies. No, seriously. He does. It's a part of Miles' origin. Technically, that's not a spoiler, because it does happen in the comics, but seriously, spoilers beyond this point, you have been warned. Anyway, speaking of Spider-Man, I guess the first thing I liked in the movie, or also the first thing in the movie, is I like how the Spider-Man from Miles' universe has blonde hair. It kind of helps you differentiate him from the midlife crisis Spider-Man from another universe. Also, speaking of multiple Spider-Men, one thing that I thought would happen was, I thought that this Gwen and this Gwen were two different Gwens, like the first one being Gwen from Miles' universe and the other one being Spider-Gwen, obviously. I thought the plot would kind of be that Spider-Gwen would teach Miles how to talk to his crush, which is Gwen in his universe, but no, apparently Spider-Gwen and Gwen are the same person. Although, I don't see how she got into Miles' rich school, because they have gotta have some registration things or something. Also, onto the rest of the Spider people, Spider-Ham and Spider-Man Noir were both really funny in starkly different ways, and Penny Parker was there, I guess? I'm sorry, she didn't really have much to do, and I'm not very familiar with her. I mean, I did read about her in some of the Spider-Man Spider-Verse comics. I'm really glad that they went with the anime look for her, though, because I like the representation. Oh, wait, though. Is it manga? Okay, so anime is the TV shows, manga is the comics, so I'm guessing she's gonna be anime? Anyways, the reason she's kind of forgettable is because, well, one, does anyone actually remember what her spider name is? Okay, let's see. Oh, wow. SP//DR. No wonder it's so forgettable. Her suit does have a cool name, but outside of written comic books, I can see that being hard to pronounce. To be honest, though, it's not really her fault. I don't have that much to say about the spider people in general. However, I do have a lot to say about the villains, which there were a lot more than I would have expected. We've got Green Goblin, Tombstone, Scorpion, Prowler, who is not really as good as the original comic version, in my opinion. You see, in the comics, he was a kid, like Spider-Man, who had this window washing job, and eventually he was fired, and so he decided to make his own window washing suit. It sounds kind of lame, but it was actually a really cool invention. He had like these claws that helped him to climb up walls or whatever, and then he had these like little pellets that he could shoot that had window washing material or whatever. And so he tried to sell his invention. They obviously denied him, and so he decided to use his invention for evil and to steal stuff. Obviously, replace the little pellets or whatever with acid or something instead of window washing material, because I know that could probably hurt your eyes, but that's not a very good weapon. Anyways, Spider-Man catches him. He eventually turns him in, and the Prowler kid actually eventually turns good because he does help Spider-Man later in the comics, which is really cool. And even though I do prefer that version of Prowler, I guess because he's more like Spider-Man, this version of Prowler is definitely still pretty cool. Although his mask kind of looks like Deadpool. But do you know who's my favorite character in this movie? Dr. Octopus. Her reveal caught me so off guard. Like, at first I was just like, oh, she's just a friendly scientist. Oh, she's an evil scientist. Oh my gosh, she's Dr. Octopus. Like, the gender swap completely fooled me until the last moment. I love this reveal. She's a great character, she looks amazing, and I really like how her tentacles are really tubey. It kind of adds to the scientist look. What I don't like, though, is after her reveal, she's kind of treated like a regular henchman. And I mean, sure, if you want a job right, do it yourself. Don't leave non-scientists to do a scientist's job. But I don't think Kingpin would want his top scientists going out and risking her life trying to capture some random spider people. And speaking of Kingpin, on to the big bad of this movie. In truth, though, he's actually not fat. All the stuff that looks like fat is actually muscle, so he's super strong. And even though he's super strong, when I was watching this movie, I wasn't really sure how the ending fight was gonna work out, because, yeah, he's strong, but then you got Spider-Man, even Miles Morales, who's a lot younger, who's also strong, also super agile, shoots webs, turns invisible, and has electric hands. I don't remember what he calls them. But I was completely wrong. Even when Miles Morales learned to master his abilities, he was no match for Kingpin. I don't know if it's because Kingpin's a really good fighter, or if Miles Morales just didn't have enough training with his powers, but man, that was a cool fight scene. But you know what was my favorite scene in this movie? Okay, here, let me list them out for you. My third favorite scene is the Dr. Octopus scene. My second favorite scene is the final battle against Kingpin. And my first favorite scene is the end credit scene. Their end credit scene is so good. Like, this is the best end credit scene I've ever seen before in my entire life. Okay, maybe my future self might argue with me about that, but so far it's my favorite. First off, the end credits halfway through start playing the Spidey Bells theme, which is like the Spider-Man version of Jingle Bells, which entertained me while I was waiting for the after credit scene, which end credits rarely are that entertaining. And then the end credit scene is just hilarious. They have Spider-Man 2099 going to a parallel universe, the first parallel universe of Spider-Man, which isn't the first Spider-Man comic, but is actually the first Spider-Man TV show where he gets into a pointing contest like that one meme. Not only did this make me like the movie even better, but it gives me a whole bunch of respect for the writers, because studio executives wouldn't normally come up with this stuff. At least in my mind. If they did, they're probably really good and they should be paid a lot more. And not only is this end credit scene hilarious, but this also introduces the idea of possibly having a sequel or even a whole series of Spider-Verse movies. Now, this movie is pretty good by itself, and I'm actually not sure if they're planning to have a sequel, but if they do, it sets it up really, really nicely. I don't know how that's gonna work though, because anytime a spider person, or really anyone in general, goes outside their universe, their atoms start falling apart and they start dying, so I don't know how they're gonna make a whole Spider-Verse like full of Spider-Man about that. So yeah, maybe Spider-Man 2099 could come up with something that keeps him alive, but I have no idea. Anyways, that is my Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse review for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and if you saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which you probably did if you're watching this spoiler section, comment below if you liked it and what your favorite part is. I guess if you didn't like it, then you probably don't have a favorite part, but maybe you do. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.